Welcome back into Showtime College Football. I'm your host, Chase Davidson. Today, I am alone in the studio as we have had a crazy holiday weekend. We missed last week due to the holidays, but we are so glad to be back for another week of college football. And it was one to remember. The final week of college football has finished up. Week 14 of college football is over, and it did not disappoint. I cannot say that enough. We had a whole bunch of rivalry matchups, a whole bunch of great ones on the side as well, and it did shake up quite a bit how the playoff is going to sort itself out. So I want to get into it, but it's just it doesn't underscore the fact that this college football season has been one of the craziest that we have ever seen. One of the craziest that we have ever seen. In the fact that it seems like there is not a one team that has put itself above everybody else. There are so many good teams that are out there, but there's not one that's like, all right, this is a clear favorite. This is a clear favorite to win the title. Obviously, we've had Oregon, who has set itself apart to a degree at number one. But I mean, I think even Sneb would say this if he was on. He'll be on later this week. That I don't think Oregon is that much further ahead in terms of. I mean, I think the top 12 teams could nearly all beat each other. Obviously there's some teams that if you were to give me head to heads, like I would take teams over certain teams, but um, yeah, it is just so much parity in college football. We wanted the 12-team playoff last year because we thought we had all this parity, and this year it's even more so. And so it's so fun to see it. We're gonna get some playoff rankings later tonight. I cannot wait for that. And I want to see what the committee does. There's a lot of teams, especially the 10 to 17 range, 10 to 18 range, that is going to be really tricky for the committee to sort out. We have an idea what they're going to do, but I mean, if you look at last year, I should really pull this up. If you look at last year, there were not this many 10-2 teams, not this many 11-1 teams. It was more you had a couple undefeateds, you had a couple 11-1s, and then it starts to drop off more. But this year, look at the entire top 25. I mean, there are so many 10-2 teams that are going to be left out of the playoff. We're looking at it right now. There are going to be at least 3, 4, 5 teams that are 10-2 that get left out of the playoff. 11-1 at this point gets you in. If you're Power 4, Boise State will probably be in at 11-1. Army probably will be an 11-1 team, and they might not get in. But nonetheless, if you're a Power 4 team, 11 wins get you in. And I personally thought that 10-2 would get in as a Power 4 team in any conference, but it looks like that's not going to be the case. I mean, we're going to see what the playoff committee does. And of course, as me and Chase talked about way early in the season, that like if everything went crazy for South Carolina, that 3-loss team could make it in. And right now, as of right now in the AP rankings, Alabama is in the playoff with 3 losses. And so it's kind of weird because you have all these 10-2 teams getting left out, but there's also these 9-3 teams that are trying to merge their way in, these SEC teams. And so, what a world of college football it is. There's going to be a lot of lives hurt, a lot of hearts broken, but also some revitalized as the playoff rankings come out. We still have one more week of the playoff rankings after today, after conference championship week, and then we'll have pretty much the stage set for bowl games and for the college football playoff. It would have been funny if Army or Navy was in it. Obviously, this is probably not going to be the case. But we thought maybe Army Navy being in it would be crazy because Army Navy play each other. They play each other after the final playoff rankings come out. So would have been pretty interesting to see. But let's get to the games of this week. I really want to talk about this one first. This is one of the biggest results we saw. Not the one we expected. The game, Michigan versus Ohio State, has been a marquee game of the last week of the season for 3 years. Well, it was for pretty much 3 straight years. It was a top 5 matchup. And this year it wasn't. First year in a while it wasn't. Michigan has won 3 straight coming into this weekend. And none of us thought Michigan was going to win. That's crazy. It's not like Michigan was a decent team. Ohio State clearly the better team, but maybe you never know. It's a rivalry game. This one was like, okay, this is the best Ohio State team, one of the best Ohio State teams we've ever seen. And this is one of the worst Michigan teams of the last 10 years. There's been some subpar Michigan teams, but this is one of the worst ones. And it's not like they had much of it's not like they had much to really go off of to win this game. It had to go perfectly right for Michigan to win this game 13-10. This game shocked me. And obviously the fight afterwards, it's fun. We're going to get into that. Um, but Ohio State, with everything to lose, how do you even deal with this? Ryan Day is a fantastic coach to a degree. I say that slowly because it feels like that all of a sudden Ryan Day has no momentum going forward. This is one of the best Ohio State teams we've ever seen, and they're going to go 10-2, losing to Michigan 4 in a row. Now, this hurts because there's a lot of players. We saw it on the field. I think that's why there were so many emotions, because it means there's a lot of players for the first time in a while for Ohio State that you're a linebacker, you're a star linebacker, you're a star-studded player who came in there to Ohio State in 2020, 2021, and you're going to leave without ever beating Michigan. You're going to leave without ever beating your rival. And that's painful. That was hard. That's hard for me to see. I don't like either. I don't like either of these teams. And so I'm unbiased in the fact that I kind of have the same amount of respect for both teams. I like them the same. I dislike them the same. I kind of just don't really like either of them. So I mean, I don't really have. It's just, ooh, man, I would not want to be an Ohio State fan right now, because it's one of those times where Ohio State is clearly better this year. They have everything to lose, and Michigan has nothing to lose. And what does Michigan do? They upset them to go 7-5 on the season and probably go to the Outback Bowl or something. And Ohio State is probably still going to make the playoff. They are out of the Big Ten championship. Was honestly, they might end up in the same place. So obviously, it sucks losing to your rival. That's almost way worse than anything. But you're probably going to end around the same rank as if you went and played Oregon and lost. I think so. Now, because other people lost, but I bet Ohio State, if they lost to Oregon, would fall to 4 or 5. Ohio State right here is going to lose to Michigan, fall to 6 or 7, maybe even 5. And then, after conference championships, Penn State's probably going to lose to Oregon. We're going to have picks on that, but, they're not favored against Oregon, which we're going to talk about. There's ESPN FBI is actually favoring Penn State, which is very interesting. We're going to talk about that game. But it's just, I mean, Ohio State's probably going to end around the same position as if they lost or won and then went and lost to Oregon in the Big Ten championship, which they're not playing in the Big Ten championship now. They're done playing until the playoff. So, Ohio State fans, if you're mad about the game, be mad about the rivalry game. That sucks. I would not wish that upon anybody. Whenever I cheer for my team, I'm like, I could go 1-11 and just beat my rival, and I'm satisfied. So I understand you are mad, but at the same time, you are probably going to finish around the same rank as if you won this game and then lost to Oregon. Just saying. But I think Ohio State does have a chance to beat Oregon if they were to play them in that game. So that's a crazy game. Now, as far as the fight afterwards, this is interesting. I got to take a drink real quick. What do we think of the pepper spray that was thrown, that was sprayed into this fight after the game? Now, I watched this fight live, and it was comedic to the fact that you see this first round of fight, and there's no pepper spray yet, I don't believe. And, there's some pushing and shoving, there's some punching. There's a guy that gets on the ground. And, of course, it finally gets kind of breaking up. And you see the Michigan player with the Michigan flag kind of dancing around. And then all of a sudden, you see him take a lane. You see a lane to the center, and he takes it to the logo and plants the flag right in front of, like in the middle of about 9 Ohio State players and a few coaches and assistants. And it's game over for that. I mean, the second round starts, and it's almost worse. And that's when the pepper spray comes out. I am surprised there was pepper spray to a degree. But at the same time, I understand. I've seen people that are saying like it was like way too aggressive to use pepper spray. But I don't know. If you're in that moment, listen, these players have helmets and pads on. And it's not the first round of them fighting. They're not pushing and shoving. They are punching. And it's the second round of this. So you don't know if it's going to get even more out of hand. And these police officers are in the middle of this fight. So honestly, I don't think I think the pepper spray was somewhat warranted. It helped break up the fight. So I'm honestly I'm in between on that. I don't really have a stance on it. I think it was, actually I do. I think it was okay to use in that situation. So we saw a series of fights throughout the day, and it was just, I don't know. Some people, this is another stance people are taking. Is flag planting going to be an an issue going forward in college football? Because it was an issue on Saturday. But is this issue a problem in the sense of other than other than the scuffles? I'm not the one breaking them up, I guess, but I think it's frankly it shows the passion of college football, and it's pretty funny to watch, and I don't even know how I feel about it. Um, but to a degree, I kind of like it. I don't know how to say that. To see all these passionate players, and it's in these rivalry games, and it's I think it's funny, but I could definitely see the NCAA coming out next year during the summer and saying, "Yeah, actually, flag planting is now banned. You're going to get a fine for it." I don't know. That's a tough one. I think it's warranted. I think if you lose on your home turf, they deserve to plant the flag. Now, I think there's better ways to do it than putting it in front of 9 Ohio State players, literally in like within a foot of them. We've seen Baker Mayfield plant a flag and nothing happened because he waited till kind of everyone had dispersed and then did it. But I think it's a show. I think it's a force of its dominance, and I mean, it frankly shows the passion of the sport. So I don't know how I feel about that. It's interesting. I want to hear you guys feel about that. Shout us out in the DMs. Showtime. College football. Send us something about that. See if you guys think it should be outlawed or you like it. And we had fights. We had Florida, Florida State, North Carolina, NC State. There were fights all over the country. It was hilarious. It was insane. It was like it randomly. It doesn't happen that often. You guys realize that there's not a fight every week. There's a fight like once or twice a season. That's to the degree of after a game, players are fist fighting. That happens like once or twice a season, let alone 5 to 6 times in 1 week. Now it is rivalry week. It's also senior night for most of the players, in the fact that it's their home senior night, and there's a lot of emotions. A lot of emotions. It is your final game, and so your subconscious rationale is you almost have nothing to lose. And so I understand players being very emotional, especially after a loss too. So, there's a degree of I don't think the NCAA should do anything. I'm also kind of in the favor of I don't like the NCAA intervening too much with the free will of players, but we'll see what they do about that. But let's move on to our next games. Oregon trashes on Washington. Finally gets revenge for the last couple years, as Washington has kind of been the guy who pushed around the Ducks, especially ruining a couple really good seasons for them. They are not going to ruin this one. Now, of course, this kind of had the Michigan Ohio State vibes, where it was like Ohio State or Oregon has everything to lose, Washington has nothing to lose. And so, what has happened in the past when Oregon has everything to lose? Oregon's lost in this game. And Oregon showed up and showed out. All credit to the Ducks. They're going to be the only defeated team or undefeated team, literally the only undefeated team in the country this year, which frankly, there's usually one or two. I mean, it feels like there's usually, or sorry, one or two more. Most seasons we have a couple undefeated teams. We've usually got one out of the SEC, or maybe they have a one loss. But we have a Big Ten. Usually Oregon, or usually Ohio State or Michigan are undefeated coming out of there. There's been quite a few. We had TCU a couple years ago. There's usually two at the minimum. There's not usually just one. I could be wrong about that. I'm not even quoting a stat. It's more just how I feel about it. So it's kind of interesting to see you know what we're seeing from this. I'm going to look at Week 15 of last year, and we've got Michigan undefeated, Washington undefeated, and Florida State undefeated. We got three. It feels like there's usually one from each conference. With give or take one. Georgia and Michigan were the year before that. TCU losing in their conference championship game. But even that, they were undefeated at the end of the year. So that's three for 2022. And so it's 2021 we had Georgia, Cincinnati. We had two there. So look, this is the first year in a while we've only had one. So I want to look up the stats on that. I'm going to get you guys a stat on the next podcast on the last time we only had one undefeated team at the end of the season. With the big conferences, that's not really happening so much, and it's not going to happen anymore. And there might even be zero. Oregon could lose this weekend, and I think it would break some records, as we have no team going into the postseason, unless you consider conference championships postseason, post-conference championships that are not undefeated. I don't think that's happened for quite a while. So interesting stat line there. Oregon stays undefeated. Texas A&M. What we thought was going to be the marquee matchup, the biggest matchup. Now, it was the marquee matchup. Sorry. It was the marquee matchup, but it didn't seem like that. It was kind of a slow game. It didn't impress a lot. It did show a lot about Texas, and Texas A&M really didn't do anything. They kind of just flipped over and lost. I don't know what they were doing. Texas A&M 3 weeks ago was 9-2, or sorry, 8-2, and sitting pretty high, and they lost to Auburn and then folded over against Texas. And I frankly lost a lot of confidence. I mean, they're unranked now. I'm assuming the CFP committee will probably have them at 25. They're probably gonna let them hang in there. That's my assumption. But it was. I mean, Texas A&M had no offensive touchdowns. What are we doing at home? This is the biggest game in Aggie history of the last 15 years. Maybe one of the biggest games in Aggie history of all time. I've heard people saying that. A number 3 ranked rival coming in. You're a pretty good team coming into that game. You are playing. Can you believe this? You are playing for the first time in 13 years, and this time it is to decide the the team to go to the SEC championship, and you just roll over and lose and die. I would be very disappointed if I was a Texas A&M fan. It wasn't even like you put up a good fight. It was just like it was kind of just a boring game, and you know, I don't got much to say. I am disappointed in Texas A&M. Good win for Texas. That's their best win all year. Now, I will say they technically do not, as according to the AP poll, Texas still is without a current ranked win. They are the highest ranked team without a win over a currently ranked team as of the AP poll. Now, that Texas A&M win obviously kind of messes with that, as that's a pretty good win. But that Texas A&M team's finishing 8-4 now. That's kind of Texas A&M style, finishing 8-4. I kind of wanted Texas A&M to pull something off and make the playoff and steal a bid. It would have been fun, but they probably, they're completely out, and they're gonna have a fun time in the Music City Bowl or some lackluster bowl for Aggie fans. And so, but I do think Mike Elko has turned things around over there. They won some big games this year, and I think that they've got it going for them. So, Texas, I did gain confidence in. Big road environment. So Texas is going to be going to the playoff, 100%. Lose the SEC championship to Georgia, you're still getting in. Georgia. Let's talk about Georgia next. I mean, this is Black Friday night game. It felt kind of weird to be watching a late night game on Friday and an SEC game nonetheless, and then having another slate of sports the next day, slate of football. Georgia Tech takes Georgia to the second longest game in college football history. 8 overtimes. Watching this game live was hilarious, fun, grueling, and we watched Georgia nearly lose at home. They're literally nearly snapped their 31-game home winning streak. I think the last time they lost was 2019 South Carolina. Someone could correct me on that. I think that's the last time they lost at home. To Georgia Tech, they haven't lost in 4 or 5 years. We're talking about there are students and players in Athens, Georgia, who have never seen. They will go their entire college career, student or a player, with never losing at home. That is insane. No one else can say that. I think Clemson fans from 2017 to 2021 or around there could say that. But there's very few teams, very few people who can say they got a complete undergraduate 4 years without their football team losing at home. That's insane. And these Georgia fans are going to be able to do it because Georgia pulls it out 44-42 in 8 overtimes. Georgia Tech should have won this game. Now, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Georgia won the game. But Georgia Tech had plenty of opportunities. And I don't think Georgia's really going to face many consequences for losing to this team. Now, Georgia Tech's going to finish 7-5 while still taking several top 10 wins and very close losses to ranked teams. They ended up playing, 5. They played 4 top 15 teams. Now, one of those being Florida State, asterisk. But they held their own. They beat Miami at home. They had an okay season. Didn't do the most, but you know what? That's a good team right there. Georgia Tech, they got a future. And so Georgia is probably going to stay ranked about the same because everyone around them is losing. They actually went up in the AP poll one spot. Man, they were several plays away, and the fact that they were one play away several times from losing and falling to a 3-loss team. And there's something about the 2 to 3 losses right now that means a lot. And so I don't know where they'd be if they had 3 losses, but you know what? The game moves on. So I don't know how I feel about Georgia right now. We don't know what Georgia team we're going to get on Saturday when they play Texas in the SEC championship. I know one thing. Texas at least brings a consistent, solid performance. They've been pretty consistent throughout the year. Now, they haven't had as hard of a schedule, but they've been pretty consistent throughout the year. Georgia has been wildly inconsistent. Georgia could play like 2022 Georgia, and we could be in for a beating. Or they could play like they did a couple weeks ago against Ole Miss. And we see several picks, and Texas wins this game. These two already played this year, if you didn't know. Georgia handed it to them 30-15 against Texas, but a lot of that had to do with Texas. It was a weird game because it was misleading because it seemed like Georgia dominated when really Georgia never had a drive longer than like 40 yards. They got the ball pretty much on Texas's own on their own on Texas's own 50 or 40 or 30 almost every drive. Not taking away from Georgia's win, but you have to consider that this game might be closer than you think. It's also very hard to beat a team twice. We're going to talk about that next podcast, of course. The Egg Bowl. Ole Miss takes down Mississippi State in kind of a close one. Mississippi State's going to finish 2-10. Ole Miss 9-3. Does Ole Miss have any chance to make the playoff? I don't think so. I wish they did. Ole Miss is a fun team to watch. They might. I mean, they're ranked 15th in the AP. They could maybe do it with some craziness that's going to happen. But there's a certain degree now of teams we know that can make the playoff. You know what? I'm going to go off the script a little bit here. I'm going to rank. Yeah, I'm going to list my teams that I think are in the playoff and teams that could make the playoff. And I'm excluding teams that I think are eliminated from the playoff. Now, conference championship games obviously change it a little bit. They're going to add some teams that are lower. But we're going to go through the list. We're going to go down the AP top 25 from Sunday, and give it to 1 to 15, 16, 17 teams that could still sneak into the playoff. Then we're going to go through Oregon, Texas, probably Penn State as well. These guys are all going to conference championships, but they are 100% guaranteed a spot. Texas could lose by quite a bit to Georgia. They're still hanging on to an at-large spot, 100%. Oregon could lose to Penn State. They're still hanging on to a spot. Penn State, even though I don't like it very much, could get railed by Oregon, and they're probably still hanging on to a top 12 spot, an at-large spot. They're going. Penn State might finish 11-2 and lose to Ohio State, lose to Oregon, never beat anybody good, and make it to the playoff, and maybe be even top 8 seed. So, listen, guys, I like Penn State. I just don't think they're very good. Penn State is going to get obliterated in the playoff. I am saying it right now. Now, if they have a home field advantage, maybe it changes things. I am still very firm on this Penn State team is not that good. Anyways, you guys have heard that all season. Notre Dame, 100% in. They don't even have any more games to play. They're in. They are 11-1. They do look pretty good on the eye test. They've looked really good. They beat They beat USC 49-35 this weekend. Don't like how many points USC put up, but I mean a lot of that was fourth quarter, and so I don't know. They had 2 pick sixes. I mean, it wasn't that close of a game. It was kind of closer than you think it was. But other than that, Notre Dame has, I think, earned a spot to a degree. Their one loss being the Northern Illinois. But then again, we're going to look at this Notre Dame team. They're going to have almost no wins over current top 25 teams. A&M might be one. They might hang in there to be to keep SEC resumes better and Notre Dame. But really, I mean, their best win's going to be they beat Louisville at home, who's not going to be ranked. They beat Georgia Tech. They beat Navy, Army. So right now, Army is Notre Dame's best win. Now, I would argue that Texas A&M, not necessarily on paper, but I'd say that's probably their better win. But I mean, you look at it, this Notre Dame team is kind of like Penn State. They're a good team that went through a very easy schedule. and they played a clean schedule to a degree. Illinois got a hold of them there, but they played a pretty clean schedule, and they're going to sit at 11-1 and make the playoff. Georgia, 10-2. If Georgia loses the SEC title game to Texas, are they still in? Chase, are they still in? Yes, I think Georgia's still in. This is a prediction, guys. Remember, this is not me. So a lot of times what we do, me and Sned, it's what we think who should be in. This right now, I'm predicting who I think will be in. And Georgia at 10-3. I know it's 3 losses. One of those losses being to Texas in the SEC championship game. I'm not predicting these games. I am just assuming the worst, as if percentage-wise how they're in the playoff. Georgia, I think, is 100% in the playoff. They could lose. Now, if they lost by a sizable margin, I think they still hang on to be in, but there's a chance. So I'd actually say I would revise. I think Georgia's a 95% lock. I'm actually going to revise. 95% lock is what I'm going to say about that. That's how, I'm pretty sure they're going to be in there. Remember, they're only 7 in the most recent CFP rankings. Miami's going to fall, so they're going to probably be at 6, unless Ohio State falls behind it. But I'm going off the AP right now, which does skew it a little bit because I'm looking at the AP. They do rank it a little bit differently, but I'm going off my predictions here. Tennessee, 10-2. No more games to play. Are they in the playoff? Yes. There are so many teams around them that are going to be moving around. They really have nowhere to go but up. I mean, Tennessee, at this point, 10-2 in the SEC is getting you in, 100%. Their only losses are to Georgia and at Arkansas. They had their bad game. But other than that, they didn't really have a huge win other than Bama at home. But this Bama team, I think, is far overrated. We're going to talk about them. But I think Tennessee even more than Georgia because Georgia still has a game to play. I think Tennessee is 100%. I mean, I don't see them falling very far. They can't really fall, right? At least more than a couple teams jumping them. They're at 8 right now in the CFP rankings. Miami's going to fall out. They're gonna be 7 or 6, depending on where Ohio State goes in the CFP rankings coming this week. And so, I mean, you tell me they're not going to fall out of the, they're not going to fall below 11 from teams winning. So Tennessee is in just based on purely like looking at it. They're not. I don't even know where I would put them right now, but they're going to be in the playoff. Ohio State, 100% in. They have no more games to play, just like Tennessee, and they're going to stay in. And that win over Penn State looks pretty good for them on the road. Now is where it gets interesting. Those top 7 are pretty easy. It didn't take me much of a sports analyst role to understand that. Most people could say those teams are probably in the playoff. Georgia is the only one really that's not 100%, and I'm really close. It's a 95% chance. They would have to get 60-0 to Texas, and maybe they fall out. Beside the point, let's talk about SMU. SMU is not going to be playing Miami in the SEC championship. Miami lost that chance. Miami lost to Syracuse, who was very good, and I think they should be ranked a little bit higher than they are. Syracuse is awesome, 9-3, great year for Syracuse. Even beat UNLV, who's 10-2. Great team this year up in Syracuse. They've got a lot. They've been recruiting really well over the years. That's a tangent, but Syracuse is a good team, and I think they deserve respect. Football school. That's a football school up there. Anyways, SMU, 11-1. This team lost once to BYU and then proceeded to win every other game. It's not the strongest games, not the strongest resume, but it's 11-1. I'd say that 11-1 is way stronger than Penn State's 11-1. It's way stronger than Notre Dame's 11-1. What are we doing here? Their loss is a way higher quality loss, and their wins overall are better. I mean, I'm not raving about them, but their best win is, I mean, they beat a decent Duke team. They went and just trounced a pretty good Cal team this week. They and the thing is that they passed the eye test. They just pretty much beat everybody to have any close games. I think SMU is severely underrated, but here I'm not talking about how good they are. I'm talking about their playoff chances. Not talking about my playoff. I'm talking about the playoff. What are their chances, percentage-wise, of making the college football playoff? This is a hard one. Can Clemson beat them? So we're going to talk about, obviously, if they win, they're in. Well, that's obvious. It's come down to one game. One game win and they're in. We know that. But SMU, if they lose this game to number 18 in the AP, Clemson, who's 9-3, who just lost to South Carolina. We're going to talk about them later. Are they still in the playoff? This is a hard one because it's not up to them anymore. When they lose this game, if they lose this game to Clemson, Clemson makes the college football playoff. Wait, actually, yeah, they would make the college football playoff, and it would give the Big 12 winner, most likely Arizona State or Iowa State, it would give them probably the top 4 seed and give Clemson the 12 seed, most likely. And where does SMU go? Can SMU find a spot, find a home in 9, 10, or 11? Can they do it? It's going to depend on how the cookies crumble. I think the percentages are pretty high, mainly because I think they're going to beat Clemson. I think SMU is a 75% chance to make the playoff right now because I think if they lose, which I think they have a 75% chance to win that game. But if they lose, so I mean, I guess I give them an 80%. I give them an 80% chance. I think there's still a pretty good chance they make it, even if they lose. But there's a pretty. I say it's 50-50. If they lose to Clemson, they might fall out. They might fall out because Indiana, who's right behind them, Indiana's 100%. Indiana's no more games to play. They're sitting top 10, 11-1. What else are they going to do? They can't really fall too much farther unless a ton of teams somehow steal bids. So let's talk about our possible bid stealers really quick before I keep going on. Clemson is the most obvious bid stealer right now. Clemson is the furthest team playing in a conference championship right now, other than UNLV. I guess UNLV is 19. They're playing a conference championship. And I guess that conference championship does matter as much as these other ones because it's really just Mountain West. So, yeah, they would be the highest rate. Okay, I got to put some respect on the Mountain West here. So we got 2 teams, 3 teams. You could say Iowa State, Clemson, UNLV. These are the bid stealers. And by bid stealers, it's kind of a March Madness term. On a team that NC State was a bid stealer last year. NC State wasn't supposed to make the tournament at large at all, not even close. NC State rolls through the ACC tournament, makes March Madness, makes the NCAA tournament by rolling through the ACC tournament. Obviously, they made the Final Four, which was crazy. But that was a bid stealer, a team that wasn't even supposed to be in there. A team like let's say Arizona State wins the Big 12 championship. They're already top 12. They're not stealing a bid. They're already in the field. They can make it at large when they're not playing another game. But we got 3 bid stealers, and they have decent chances. I obviously got my thoughts about the games I'm going to give, but how likely are the chances that one of these teams, I think there's a decent chance that one of these teams wins a game. Iowa State, Clemson, or UNLV, and this hurts really badly the at-large teams because you're going to take a team out or even a team that's already solidified in and put in another one because that's where it gets really tricky. So, man. So some it's going to be easier. Boise State, if you lose to UNLV, you're out. UNLV's in. Iowa State, if you beat Arizona State's out. You are in. It's Clemson SMU. It is Clemson SMU that is the most interesting conference championship in terms of either team making the playoff. Because the SEC and Big Ten, both teams, like I said, are pretty much guaranteed to make the playoff. Pretty much guaranteed. No matter the results. Even in a blowout, it has to be extremely extreme, and there would have to be other results that bump them out, like Georgia. But I think Clemson SMU is really the one that could shake up, where SMU hangs on and steals a bid, and you have the ACC taking 2 bids. Because I think Miami is pretty much out, especially if a team like Clemson wins and bumps everybody down. But there's a lot that could happen. Indiana, 11-1. What happens to them? What happens to them if someone else loses? They're number 10 in this committee's last rankings. How far is the committee going to drop Miami? 10-2 Miami. The AP sure dropped them far. I dropped them really far in my rankings. I have them at 19. Man, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be a super interesting week. I'm excited to see what the playoff committee does. It's going to tell us a lot about what we expect from these teams come conference championship weekend. But there's a lot of teams with a lot of important games to play. Alabama is one of the most interesting teams to talk about right now. I'm going to skip Boise State. Indiana right now, I say the chances are 90%. Sorry, I got to talk in order here. Indiana, I'd say they're 90%. I'd say they don't play another game. It'd have to be some chaos to happen that would bump them completely out. It'd be. I'm trying to think of a scenario where they actually get bumped out It would have to be SMU losing, but them pushing Indiana down. It's really tricky. I don't think Indiana is pretty much a solid lock. I'd say 90%. They make it in just because they don't play another game. There's benefits of not making your conference championship. If Indiana was in the conference championship, you know what would happen? They'd probably be out of the playoff. I'm just saying. They'd be out of the playoff. So let's talk about Boise State. Boise State, I mean, their chances, I'd say, a 75% chance. They have a 75% chance of winning that game. If they lose, they're out. If they win, they're in. UNLV, right with them. I'd say they have a 25% chance to make it. If they win, they're in because it's the top 5 conference champions. And as of right now, our top 5 conferences, all are kind of solidified. There's not an American team that's really hunting for the UNLV Boise State spot or the Big 12 spot. So it's not really going to be, I really don't think that there's going to be a problem with the G5 teams. It's going to be either UNLV or Boise State, and they're going to hang on. So 75% chance for Boise State. I would be really excited to see if G&T decides to play in the playoff. It'd be amazing to see. Alabama, 9-3. 9-3. You realize they're 9-3. They have 3 losses. There's a lot of people causing hubbub because this team lost to Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Not to mention, they lost to Oklahoma by a lot. They lost to Oklahoma by 3 scores. No, not 1 score, not 2 scores, but 3 scores. And they're sitting at number 11 in the AP poll. And I don't really know how I feel about it because I frankly don't feel like a lot of teams below them deserve to be up there. I think they should be below Arizona State. And the problem is I feel like South Carolina is playing better than them. But you want to know who beat South Carolina? Alabama. So you can't really put them below South Carolina. Miami is just crappy. They shouldn't be up there. Ole Miss beat South Carolina, but South Carolina is above Ole Miss. Oh, man. Of those 3 teams, if you start getting them closer and closer together in the rankings, you know what you have to do? You have to sort them up by head-to-head. Ole Miss jumps South Carolina and gets in there. And Alabama and Ole Miss are the teams we're deciding between. Even though South Carolina, I think, is playing better ball right now. Oh, man, it's tricky. Okay. Alabama, I'd say, this is going to be tricky. It just depends on where the committee ranks Alabama. Oh, it's going to be tricky. So they ranked Alabama 13 last week. Ole Miss 14. South Carolina 15, obeying the head-to-head. And I was talking about the AP when I was talking about who was behind who. But Clemson was ranked 12 in the last rankings. They're probably going to fall to 17. All those teams are going to move up 12, 14, 15. The College Football Playoff Committee has Arizona State below all these teams. And you don't realize that South Arizona State or Iowa State, one of them is going to jump up and steal a bid. One of them has to. And so you're looking at these 3 SEC teams that are all 9-3. Which one deserves to go the most? Because you can't put 2 of them in. It's probably pretty much has to be one of them. Which team has the most likeliness? As of right now, it might come down to just Bama because of the tiebreaker of South Carolina. Because I feel like South Carolina is a better team. I feel like South Carolina is more deserving. But head-to-head has to be honored. Why do we play the games? Because head-to-head matters. Alabama is a better team than South Carolina because they beat them on the field. Even though I would say South Carolina is playing better ball right now. It's hard to say. I obey head-to-head pretty much at all costs. There's very few times where I will not obey head-to-head if a team is ranked within a couple ranks of each other. If they're similar in resume, head-to-head should matter more than anything, and it's not close. Because why do we play the games? So, Alabama's chances, I'd say, are 70%. I think Alabama will probably make it in at 11 or 12. Now, that is warranting there's not that many bid stealers. Alabama is the first team out if there are any bid stealers. If Clemson beats SMU, SMU gets in over Bama. If Iowa State beats Arizona State, Arizona State's going to get in, Iowa State's going to get in and bump out Bama. And so, it's a hard choice to make. It's a hard thing to make. We're going to see what happens. But let's talk about these teams that that are bottom on the list. Arizona State, Iowa State. This is easy. What's your chance to make the playoff? Well, I'd say Arizona State 60, Iowa State 40. Why do you say that? Well, because I think Arizona State has a 60% chance to win the game. It all comes down to one game for Arizona State, Iowa State. Easy, done. South Carolina, 45% chance to make the playoff. I say there's a decent chance, but Bama's not losing this week. They don't play. So it's really going to come down to complete chaos, which I don't think there's that much chaos that can happen because there's not that many more games being played. South Carolina might be in the playoff. They might not. We're going to have to see what the playoff committee says. Whatever the playoff committee says, it's going to really change things. Miami. What's the likelihood that Miami makes the playoff? 20%. 20%. You need the win to get you in. You need a win. Miami's going to get passed up. I mean, frankly, I'm going to be honest. There's a bunch of 10-2 teams. Please. Iowa State, BYU, and honestly, even UNLV are better 10-2 teams than Miami. I'm sorry. Arizona State as well. Way better 10-2 teams than Miami. Way better. Look, please give me one, other than Cam Ward being a really good quarterback. Give me one reason. Look at the schedule. Tell me. This Miami team never played a ranked team on the schedule. And it's not like they killed everybody. They had way too many close games. And as a matter of fact, 2 of them they lost to teams they should not have lost to. Now, Syracuse is a good team, but still. This Miami team, I would say, Iowa State, BYU, Arizona State, these 3 Big 12 teams are much more deserving than Miami to be ahead of them. So, let that be known. Let that be known. The Big 12 was a much stronger lead than the ACC, I think, overall, depth-wise, talent-wise. And so, that's my opinion on that. So, I think Miami has a very low chance of making it. Based on my opinion, but also the community's opinion. I don't think Miami has much of a chance. Would be fun to see Cam Ward, but, it would be fun to see Miami travel up to Columbus, Ohio, and go play Ohio State in a freezing cold game, or go play Indiana. It'd be pretty dang funny. Or go to Boise State, for heck's sake. Go to Miami at Boise State for the playoff. Oh my gosh, we might have Alabama at Boise State. We might have Alabama a 9-8 matchup. We don't know who's going to trend up. We might have some guys. The Smurf Turf might host a playoff game. Boise State might host a playoff game, and that's going to be the funniest thing ever. It's probably going to be snowing, and that's going to be so funny to have Boise State, Albertson Stadium. I might even go up to that game. We'll see how much it's probably going to cost. Arm and a leg. I don't care. That'd be funny. Oh, anyways. Iowa State, Ole Miss, BYU. Ole Miss 9-3. Iowa State, BYU 10-2. Iowa State obviously already discussed, but Ole Miss 9-3, BYU 10-2. These teams have about the same chance to me. Ole Miss a little, slightly less. Ole Miss pretty much. The problem is they have too many bad losses. That Kentucky loss still haunting them, and you can't lose to Florida. Florida playing good ball, but you just can't. Had to win out. Ole Miss, I don't think can get in. I think it's a 10% chance Ole Miss gets in. I think it's a 20% chance BYU gets in. Has to be some absolute craziness. To a degree, Ole Miss might have a better chance in some worlds because the SEC 9-3 in the SEC, people might consider better than 10-2 in the Big 12. But Ole Miss does have a win over Georgia. So that being said, but Clemson, UNLV next on the list. They've got a slight outside chance, basically because they have a game. They have a higher chance than BYU or Ole Miss or Miami or South Carolina because their destiny is in their own hands. Clemson, UNLV, Iowa State, go for it. Shoot for the stars because you got a chance. And everyone else, Colorado, Illinois, Missouri, Syracuse, Army, Memphis, it's pretty much over. No more shot. No more shot. It's all over. Even 10-2 Memphis. 10-2 Memphis could not make it because the American is just too darn sad. Army plays Tulane for the American Championship. It's going to be a good win for them, but they cannot pass up the Mountain West Big 12 or ACC champ. They will get ahead. Now, here's the one thing I will say. The one last thing I need to say about the rankings. Will Boise State get the bye? If they beat UNLV, this will be their best win of the whole year. They've already beat UNLV once. If they beat them again, this will be their best win of the year. UNLV has proven themselves to be a solid squad. 10-2. Will Boise State be above the Big 12 or ACC champion? It's going to really depend. Because for several weeks now, I've been saying if the Big 12 champ will pass up the Mountain West champ, because the Big 12 champ, i.e. Arizona State or Colorado or BYU or Arizona State or Iowa State, this was a couple weeks ago, obviously. Those are not the teams in the championship. I was saying they would have several ranked wins to end the season in a row. It would have to go to hell. The scores, everyone would have to lose a game. They have to. If some, no one would have to. No one could win out. Then Boise State could have the first round bye. If Arizona State wins, they will have the first round bye. They will pass up Boise State, especially if it's a close game between Boise State and UNLV. They will pass up Boise State and get the first round bye. They will. Now, well, I guess I say that with a grain of salt because I look at Arizona State. I think Arizona State should be ranked 10 right now. But in the playoff rankings, the committee has Arizona State at 16. Now we're going to see how they moved them up. But I mean, the blatant disrespect is insane to Arizona State. It is absurd. It is insane. I can't even believe it sometimes. But I still think that Arizona State should pass up Boise State. I think even with the committee, I think if Arizona State beats Iowa State, especially convincingly, I think they'll pass up Boise State and be at 10, Boise State 11, something like that. And they'll pass them up. Now, if SMU loses to Clemson, then I think Boise and Arizona State will get a first round bye, and it won't even be a question because Clemson will slide into the 12th spot, or Boise State loses, obviously. So that's my sense on that. I think it's actually fairly simple. The most complicated scenario is if all the favorites win. Then that's a little complicated because I think Arizona State should definitely deserve consideration to be over Boise State. So, that's how I feel about it. That's how I feel about it. We're gonna see. We're gonna see how it goes. But guys, it was a great week of college football. Colorado dismantled Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State went 0-9 in the Big 12. You want to know who picked them to win? Me. Everybody else. And you know who we picked them to play against in the Big 12 championship? Utah. You know who had 2 Big 12 wins this year? Utah. It's insane. It's insane. The Big 12 was absolutely upside down. Talked about it all year. But it's the gift that keeps on giving. Gift that keeps on giving. Go Syracuse. What a win versus Miami. What a win. South Carolina upsets Clemson in a game that we picked South Carolina because South Carolina is playing some dang good football, and they are battle-tested. You know who isn't battle-tested? Clemson. We're going to make some good picks against that. We're going to see what happens. Me and Sned are going to discuss our picks for those games. Conference championship week's exciting. Iowa State beats Kansas State and only moves up like 1 in the AP. We're going to see how much they move up in the college football playoff rankings. The Big 12 gets 0 respect. It is insane. UNLV destroys Nevada, sealing their destiny to go to the Mountain West Championship game. BYU and Houston get a little spicy. BYU finishes 10-2, but does not make the Big 12 championship game. And there is a 4-way tie for first in the Big 12, but due to tiebreakers and all such, Arizona State and Iowa State going to that championship game. Memphis upset Tulane in a great Thanksgiving game. That was fun to watch. Couldn't have said it any better. Fun game to watch. Memphis is a good team. I really wish Memphis wouldn't have lost a game to UTSA or to Navy because I wanted to see Memphis in the playoff, and I know Sned did as well. Tough one to see. But guys, it's going to be a good week of football. Not much more of it left. The 12-team playoff is upon us, and there is still so much to be decided. Oh, it's going to be exciting. Those 3 games, because Big Ten and SEC championships don't matter too much. The other ones sure do. In terms of who's making the playoff. Seeding, they all matter for seeding. But, it's going to be crazy. Anyways, guys, signing off from Showtime College Football. See you guys next time.